There is a loneliness that is harder to explain than any other kind. Not the loneliness of being single, not the loneliness of losing someone, not even the loneliness of being in a room full of strangers. It is the loneliness of lying next to someone who loves you and feeling completely, utterly, invisibly alone. And the worst part is this: you cannot explain it. Because from the outside, everything looks fine. You have a partner, you share a home. They would say they love you if you asked, and they would mean it. There is nothing wrong, technically, with the relationship. And yet, there is a space inside you that their presence does not fill. A silence that their voice does not reach. A particular kind of hunger, not for company, because you have company, but for something deeper. Something you cannot quite name. Something that feels like it has been missing for a long time. You tell yourself you are being too sensitive, too needy, too much. You try to push the feeling down and be grateful for what you have. But it keeps coming back. That quiet, persistent, deeply confusing ache of feeling alone. Not despite your relationship, but somehow inexplicably inside it. Here is the question that this episode is going to answer. Why does one partner almost always feel more alone? What is actually happening psychologically, neurologically, emotionally when one person in a loving relationship carries a loneliness the other person doesn't even know exists? Stay with me, because the answer is going to change how you understand yourself, your partner, and the invisible architecture of the relationship you are in. There is a specific kind of pain that sits in therapists' offices more often than almost any other. It is not the pain of betrayal, though that pain is real and devastating. It is not the pain of conflict or incompatibility or loving someone who does not love you back. It is quieter than all of those, more confusing, more isolating in a very particular way, because it is a pain that cannot easily be shared with the person who sits closest to you. It is the pain of feeling alone inside a relationship. Not metaphorically alone, not occasionally alone, but chronically, quietly, persistently alone, in a way that coexists somehow with genuine love, with genuine commitment, with a partner who is present, who is trying, who would be devastated to know the depth of what you carry. And the person who carries this loneliness almost always carries it in silence. Because how do you explain it? How do you say to the person who loves you, I feel alone? Not because you are absent, not because you don't care, but because something essential about me is not being reached, and I don't know how to tell you what it is. I'm not sure I even know myself. Relationship psychologists have a name for this experience. They call it relational loneliness, the specific, qualitatively distinct loneliness that exists not in the absence of a partner, but inside the presence of one who cannot quite reach the part of you that most needs to be found. And research consistently shows that in most long-term relationships, one partner carries significantly more of this relational loneliness than the other. Not because one partner is better or worse. Not because one partner loves more or tries harder. But because of specific, deeply psychological reasons that have everything to do with how we are wired, how we were shaped, and how we learned, or failed to learn, to be truly known by another person. Today on The Connection Theory, we are going inside this experience, fully, honestly, without flinching. I'm Dr. Alex Morgan, and this is one of the most important conversations we have had on this channel. Let me start by making a distinction that most people have never heard, but that changes everything once you understand it. There are two fundamentally different kinds of loneliness. The first is social loneliness, the loneliness that comes from the absence of people, from being physically isolated, from lacking relationships, from not having enough human contact in your life. This is the loneliness most people think of when they use the word. And it has a relatively clear solution: more connection, more relationships, more contact. The second kind is intimate loneliness, and it is entirely different in its nature, its causes, and what it requires to be healed. Intimate loneliness is not the absence of people. It is the presence of people, including people who love you, without the specific experience of being truly known. Of having your full inner life, not just the presentable parts, not just the competent and capable and together parts, but the frightened parts, the uncertain parts, the raw and unpolished and deeply private parts, witnessed by another human being and received without judgment. Psychologist John Cacioppo, one of the world's leading researchers on loneliness, spent decades distinguishing between these two forms. And what he found is this. Intimate loneliness is not only qualitatively different from social loneliness, it is more damaging. It is more chronic. It is harder to identify and therefore harder to address. And it is fully capable of existing inside even the most committed and loving of relationships. In fact, in some ways, intimate loneliness inside a relationship is more painful than the loneliness of being single. Because when you are single and lonely, there is at least a coherent explanation. There is at least the hope that connection might be found when the right person comes along. But when you are in a loving relationship and still lonely, the confusion is profound. There is no easy explanation. There is no clear hope for what might change it. There is only the bewildering, disorienting experience of being loved and still not quite reached. And this is the experience that one partner in most long-term relationships carries, quietly, often silently, often without fully understanding what they are experiencing or why. Here is something about the neuroscience of human connection that most people have never considered. The brain does not experience loneliness as the absence of people. It experiences loneliness as the absence of felt connection, the subjective embodied sense that another person's inner world and your own are genuinely presently in contact. Neuroscientist Matthew Lieberman at UCLA, whose research on the social brain is among the most important in the field, found that the human brain has a dedicated neural network for processing social connection. And this network is essentially always running, always monitoring the social environment for cues of genuine connection or its absence. Here is the crucial part. This network cannot be satisfied by the mere presence of another person. It cannot be satisfied by the knowledge that someone loves you. It can only be satisfied by the experience of felt connection, by real-time signals from another person's nervous system that say, I am present with you. I see you. I am here in contact with your actual inner world, not a version of you that I have constructed in my mind. When those signals are absent, when a relationship is present in structure but not in felt contact, the social brain registers something that functions neurologically like aloneness, like absence, like the relational equivalent of hunger. And here is where one partner begins to experience more loneliness than the other. Because in most relationships, one partner is more emotionally expressive and one is more emotionally contained. One partner more readily gives signals of felt presence through verbal engagement, through emotional responsiveness, through the kind of attentive listening that communicates, I am here, inside this moment, with you. And one partner gives those signals less readily, not because they feel them less, but because they have learned, for reasons we are about to explore, to contain and regulate rather than express. The more expressive partner provides signals of connection. The more contained partner receives them and feels connected, but the more contained partner does not return those signals with the same frequency or fluency. And the more expressive partner, whose social brain is monitoring constantly for felt connection signals, receives a level of signal that is significantly lower than what they are providing. The result? One partner feels connected, the other partner feels alone. In the same relationship, with the same love, at the same time. This asymmetry and the specific psychological reasons it develops is what we need to understand. Here is the deepest psychological layer of this experience. The partner who feels more alone inside the relationship is almost always the partner with a higher need for felt emotional connection and a higher capacity to feel the absence of it acutely. And both of those things, the higher need and the higher sensitivity, trace back with remarkable consistency to attachment. Dr. Sue Johnson, the founder of emotionally focused therapy and one of the most important relationship psychologists of our time, describes adult romantic relationships as attachment bonds, not metaphorically, but literally. The same neurobiological system that governed your relationship with your earliest caregivers governs your relationship with your romantic partner. The same deep need to be felt, seen, reached, and held by your primary attachment figure, that need does not disappear in adulthood. It transfers. And here is what attachment research tells us about the partner who carries more loneliness. They almost always developed in childhood an attachment history that made emotional presence feel unpredictable. Their caregivers were sometimes emotionally available and sometimes not. Sometimes warm and present, sometimes distracted or unavailable. Not abusive necessarily, not even particularly dysfunctional in many cases, just inconsistent in their emotional attunement. And the child who experienced this inconsistency learned a very specific thing. Emotional connection with the people I love is not guaranteed. It has to be monitored. It has to be pursued. And its absence is something I feel very, very acutely. This child becomes the adult who enters a relationship with a nervous system that is exquisitely attuned to the presence or absence of felt connection. Who notices immediately when their partner is emotionally present, and who feels the absence of that presence with an intensity that their partner, raised with different attachment experiences, may not even register. The partner who feels less lonely is not feeling more loved. They are feeling less sensitive to the absence of felt connection because their attachment history taught them that emotional unavailability was normal, expected, something to manage rather than mourn. Neither history is better. Neither partner is right or wrong. But the combination, a highly attachment-sensitive partner and a more attachment-regulated partner, creates the precise conditions for relational loneliness to be distributed unequally. For one person to lie awake in the dark, carrying an ache the other person does not even know is there. Now let's look at what happens inside the relationship, the specific patterns and mistakes that deepen the lonely partner's experience and make it harder to resolve. Perhaps the most important pattern, and the most common, is that the lonely partner never names what they are experiencing. Not because they are weak, not because they don't want to, but because naming it feels impossible. Because saying, "I feel alone," to a partner who is present, who loves you, who is trying, sounds like an accusation. Like an unfair indictment of a person who is doing nothing wrong. So the lonely partner stays quiet. They hope the feeling will pass. They tell themselves they are being unreasonable. They manage the loneliness in private, perhaps by staying busy, perhaps by investing more in friendships, perhaps by losing themselves in work or content, or the thousand small escapes that modern life makes available. But unspoken loneliness does not heal. It accumulates. Layer by layer, silence by silence, it builds into a wall that becomes, over time, more and more difficult to dismantle. The second pattern is not about neglect. It is not about not caring. It is about the specific limitations of human empathy when applied to an experience one has never had. The partner who carries less relational loneliness genuinely cannot feel what their partner is feeling because their own emotional architecture does not produce that experience in the same way. When the relationship feels stable to them, when there is no conflict, no crisis, no obvious absence, they register the relationship as healthy, as fine. They are not wrong, exactly. From inside their experience, the relationship is fine. They feel connected. They feel loved. They simply cannot see the specific, quiet, persistent gap in their partner's experience, because that gap does not exist in their own. The third pattern is particularly devastating because it is so common and so invisible. The lonely partner reaches out for connection, but they reach out in ways that don't communicate reaching out. They reach through proximity, sitting close, initiating touch, or through logistics, suggesting plans, asking about schedules, or through emotion, expressing frustration, withdrawing, becoming quiet in ways that they hope will signal their need without requiring them to name it. The less lonely partner receives these signals and does not read them as connection bids. They read them as proximity or planning or mood and respond accordingly. Neither partner is lying. Both are communicating, but they are communicating in different languages, and the translation is failing completely. The fourth pattern, and perhaps the saddest, is that over time, the partner who carries relational loneliness learns to adapt to it. They stop expecting to be fully reached. They calibrate their need for emotional connection downward, not because the need disappears, but because expecting it to be met has become too painful. They become, in a way that is entirely understandable and entirely heartbreaking, self-sufficient. They find other ways to meet their need for felt connection, through friendships, through work, through creative outlets, through any of the thousand ways human beings meet a need that is not being met at home. and the relationship stabilizes. Both partners settle into a functioning, comfortable, mutually loving arrangement in which one partner's deepest relational need is quietly, permanently undermet. Not because either partner wanted this, because neither partner found the language or the courage or understood the psychology clearly enough to interrupt the pattern before it became the shape of the relationship. The experience of feeling alone inside a relationship is not new, but modern life has created specific conditions that make it more common, more persistent, and more difficult to recognize and address than at any point in recent history. Consider the cultural narrative around relationships that most Americans absorb through media, through social norms, through the collective conversation about what relationships are and what they require. That narrative says, if you are in a relationship, you are not lonely. Loneliness is for single people. Loneliness is solved by finding a partner. And if you have a partner and are still lonely, there is something wrong with you. You are too needy, too sensitive, too demanding of things that reasonable people don't require. This narrative is not just unhelpful, it is actively harmful. Because it tells the partner who experiences relational loneliness that their experience is pathological, that what they feel is a personal failing rather than a legitimate human need that is simply not being met. And so they stay quiet. They minimize their experience. They tell themselves to be grateful for what they have, which is real and worth being grateful for, while simultaneously dismissing a need that is equally real and equally worth addressing. Modern technology compounds this in a specific and particularly painful way. The partner who feels alone inside the relationship has, in the smartphone, an endless supply of pseudo-connection, of social media validation, of group chat warmth, of parasocial relationships with content creators and communities that provide a simulation of felt understanding. And while these connections are real in their own way, they are structurally incapable of meeting the need that relational loneliness represents. Because relational loneliness is not a need for any connection. It is a need for the specific, irreplaceable, impossible to substitute experience of being known by the person who has chosen you, of having your full inner life received by the one person whose reception matters most. No amount of social media engagement can meet that need. No amount of online community can substitute for it. And the partner who turns to those things to manage their loneliness finds, eventually, that managing it is not the same as healing it. I want to say something now that I think is the most important thing in this entire episode. The partner who feels more alone inside the relationship is not too sensitive. They are not too needy. They are not demanding something unreasonable from the person who loves them. They are expressing imperfectly, often silently, often in ways that are hard to read, one of the most fundamental human needs that exists. The need to be genuinely known, to be seen in the full complexity and particularity of who they actually are, not who they perform being, not who it is convenient to need them to be, but who they actually are in the private, unguarded, most essentially themselves version of their experience. This need is not pathological. It is the need that every human being carries. What varies is not the presence of the need, but the sensitivity to its absence. And the partner who feels more alone is simply the partner whose sensitivity to that absence is higher, whose nervous system, shaped by an attachment history that taught them to monitor for connection, registers the gap more acutely. That sensitivity is not a flaw. In a relationship with the right understanding, it is a gift. Because the partner who feels more acutely is also the partner who notices more, who is more present to the texture of the connection, who cares more precisely about the quality of what exists between two people. The path forward, for both partners, is not for the lonely partner to feel less. It is for the relationship to become a container where feeling is safe, where the loneliness can be named without becoming an accusation, where the less lonely partner can hear, "I feel alone," and respond not with defensiveness, but with curiosity. Tell me more. Help me understand what you need. I want to reach you. I just don't always know how. That conversation, that willingness, is what changes everything. Not because it instantly solves the loneliness, but because the willingness to hear it is itself the signal that the lonely partner has been waiting for. The signal that says, you are not too much. You are not asking for something unreasonable. You are asking to be known, and I want to know you. Let me leave you with something I want you to carry out of this episode. If you are the partner who feels more alone, I want you to hear this. You are not broken. You are not too needy. You are not asking for something that love cannot provide. You are asking for the thing that love is most essentially for, to be known, fully, without editing, without apology. And the fact that you feel the absence of that so acutely, the fact that your nervous system keeps returning to this ache, keeps registering the gap between what is and what could be, that is not your weakness. That is your knowledge of what a relationship can be at its deepest. And if you are the partner who has not known, who has not registered the loneliness that existed so close to you in the person you love for however long it has been there, I want you to hear this. You did not fail. You did not see what you could not see, but now you can see it. And what you do with that seeing is the most important relationship decision you will make. Ask. Not with guilt, not with the heaviness of a confession, but with genuine curiosity. With the open, courageous, quietly profound question, are you lonely? Are there parts of yourself that you have been keeping from me, not because you wanted to, but because you weren't sure I could hold them? Tell me. I want to know. All of it. The parts you think are too much, the parts you've been managing alone, the parts of you that haven't been reached. I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. That is the answer to relational loneliness. Not a technique, not a schedule, not a communication framework. Just one human being turning toward another and saying with their whole presence, I see that you have been alone, and I want that to change, starting now. I'm Dr. Alex Morgan. This has been The Connection Theory. If this reached something in you today, if it named something you have been carrying in silence, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe for more psychology of love, intimacy, and human connection. And I will see you in the next one.